Good evening, everyone. I am so happy to see you. Hesperus will be joining me in just a flash. A flash!
Here I am.
Hi, everyone. So, tonight we are going to be doing a very special episode about some things that both Hesperus and I feel are deeply important within the night kind community and within other communities. So I'm going to let Hesperus talk a little bit about that.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us. I do want to apologize in advance if we do get disconnected. We are coming at you from the West Coast, right in the middle of the desert, much of which is a rolling dead zone. So if we do get interrupted, it's most likely just the elements conspiring to censor us. That said, there have been increasingly relevant and urgent, I believe, issues that have come to our attention that are also longstanding, if we're honest. Not only, as you said, in the night kind community specifically, but in this modern day and age, and for all recorded history, sadly, a pattern of violation that I think it's important to address so that we can hopefully end that cycle. We're not going to be naming any names, and this isn't a witch hunt. How inappropriate would that be? We would like to, though, acknowledge something that we have noticed is of special importance in the Nightkind community, a few particular specific patterns of, well, where we could be safer than we are. If we are a little bit more aware of some of these patterns ahead of time, if we spot some red flags, and if we know what to do, if we encounter this, or if we notice some of these patterns in our own behavior, how can we improve? So a bit of a content warning. I know you probably see a bit of a disclaimer rolling at the bottom there. We are going to be discussing some very sensitive, delicate, potentially controversial topics tonight. I'm going to be talking about sex a lot, and more importantly, about consent generally, but also specifically when it comes to sex and magical practice and vampiric feeding. And again, these topics can be very delicate. Some of us have more personally invested in the subject matter. If this is an especially sensitive topic for you, we won't take it personally if you need to pause or come back to this later. But we do believe it's an important topic. I think it's one that's underexplored because it makes people uncomfortable. But I think it's really important that we become more comfortable talking about exactly these topics. Okay, enough of me lecturing on and on. What the heck am I talking about? What is consent? Raven, would you like to give us a very basic...
Consent is a hell yes, not a hell no. Consent is getting communication going and actually having a conversation as to what is acceptable and what is not acceptable for all individuals involved in different situations.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think we hear the term come up a lot, specifically in reference to the most intimate of relationships. But the truth is, it's a non-negotiable, essential part of every interpersonal connection. you have to consent to a handshake. Otherwise, somebody's just grabbing you, which is not cool, even if it's the social norm. Um, Consent is absolutely essential before interacting in an intimate way, by which I don't just mean sex, although sex is usually a pretty intimate relationship, but also, gosh, speaking on deep subjects with people is very intimate. Not everyone is open to hearing every deep, intimate thought. If you're trauma dumping on people when they aren't open to it, that can be considered a consent violation as well. So it's important to have a much broader view, a general idea of consent that applies not only to sex, but to, honestly, if you are interested in very intimate sexual relationships, you're going to have to get pretty good at consent in general beforehand. People aren't going to trust you uh, with the most intimate parts of themselves if you can't read the room, if you can't pick up on some of these subtle cues that people are uncomfortable. The general rule of thumb is that you want to avoid making people uncomfortable with the way that you engage with them. Uh, Now, that is sometimes easier said than done. We're going to talk about some common sense guidelines that help maximize your chances of keeping within those lines. Um, but the truth is, it's not all that common, as we've found in discussing this with each other and with a number of other people. We found, even though we've learned a lot the hard way, sex ed taught me a lot about various venereal diseases and how to avoid them, but it didn't tell me a darn thing about how to communicate consent,
Right.
or at all, for that matter. Um, Now, a big part of where I learned about how to have these discussions, how to ensure consent, that everybody involved is actually getting what they're there to get out of it and nothing else, is from the BDSM community.
Yes.
Now, the Nightkind community has a lot of overlap there. It used to be, and still is for some folks, the primary way to seek out intimate partners that are open to exploring connections that are atypical. People who are open to role playing and certain types of intimate engagement may also be open to conversations about energetic exchange. They'll be a little more likely to get it in some of our experiences anyway. Not to mention some of us feed sexually, which we're going to get to a bit later. Now, I know, Raven, you used to do a podcast a lifetime ago that increased awareness about some of the subcultures in the BDSM community, some of these practices, and crucially, how to navigate consent, specifically in situations where it's often especially important. And in some places, it's considered impossible to consent to being harmed. But there are people who have a deep need to be harmed in specific contexts. Do you have some thoughts on?
So I had a show with a friend of mine in Utah called Behind Closed Doors.
Mhm.
And I wanted to start that show because in Utah, there are a lot of restrictions when it comes to sexuality, and people cannot have open conversations about kinks or fetishes or any of those kinds of things because they are raised in religious environments that don't really have those conversations. So the show ended up becoming something that was actually monumental because there were a lot of people that didn't understand the conversations that needed to be had about consent. They just thought that their partner was going to immediately know that they loved XYZ and they'd be totally into it. But that's not really the case. you have to have deeper conversations to see what other people are willing to try or partners are willing to try. And it's not that, my co-host and I engaged in all these topics. We actually did a lot of research and a lot of study to figure out what to bring forward. So one of the things that I consistently saw was just that people didn't know there were classes that you could take on not only how to do things within the BDSM community, but also how to do them safely, how to work issues out, compassionate communication, which, to clarify what I mean by that for some that may not know, it means not being afraid to talk about the toughest of topics, even when it hurts, being able to communicate through those specific issues. And, and so within consent, these are all things that, we talked about on the show. And so finding that it wasn't just necessarily in the metaphysical communities or the night side communities, but it was also happening in BDSM communities and other things, to where people just didn't have the context or the knowledge to understand some of those basics. Well, that's important to know. So that's what the show was basically about, is helping people to get comfortable with the uncomfortable and actually start talking about those things. And then we also had people that would submit stories and tell us about some not so great experiences that they would have, so that perhaps somebody else could be maybe prevented from having to undergo those circumstances. I have a few stories I'll be sharing a little bit later on about my not so great experiences, so that it hopefully helps some of you to understand why it's so important to have these conversations.
And I'm glad you mentioned the importance of explicit verbal communication. In metaphysical communities in particular, it's not uncommon for people to feel profound psychic connections with other people. They will be attuned to them in such a way that they know what they're feeling and thinking before they even say it out loud. And I'm not going to tell you that those connections aren't real. I've experienced them myself. They're beautiful. Still get them to say it out loud. You might know for sure that they are on board up here and in here, but I need it to be out there in the world for sure, if for no other reason than to make sure anyone outside doesn't get the wrong impression. That can be a very real, it comes up a lot in discussions about this, defensiveness and fear around, well, one time my good friend was falsely accused of this or whatever. False accusations can happen. I have seen some incredible pettiness, and spiritual communities sadly are not immune. We're not above being children to each other sometimes, and deeply vindictive enough to try intentionally to ruin someone's reputation with lies. I'm not going to say that 100% of accusations of misconduct are true, but I will say, if you follow the same guidelines that guarantee that people stay safe in these intimate connections, the odds that someone will be able to manufacture any sort of evidence that misconduct happened diminish significantly. If you're not pulling people into weird power dynamics or behind closed doors for all of your conversations that don't need to be, then people are going to have fewer opportunities to start these lies about you. Not to mention, much more importantly, if that becomes the norm, Other predators won't be able to enter your traditions and use them as tools to prey on vulnerable people. I don't believe that most of the traditions in the community that I have seen misused were designed for the purpose of taking advantage of vulnerable people. But I've seen it happen, where if the initiatory structure of a system insists that the high elder be alone behind closed doors with the new soon to be initiate, someone who knows next to nothing by definition, they're brand new, the power dynamics at play can pressure that person into going into the situation without full preparedness, and can make them less likely to leave even if they do feel uncomfortable. I don't like that being an option, not because that can't be a legitimate part of an initiatory system, but because it can be so easily misused. Even if what happens is this person comes out and years later, for any number of reasons, decides to present a narrative that maybe isn't what you experienced, but damages your reputation. A lot of that can be prevented by putting some of these common sense guidelines in place. Okay, also on the subject of, I know people are going to be challenging the conversation itself right from the start, because I've seen that pattern as well, and I get it. We are a bunch of weirdos. The way that we see the world and the way that we interact with each other is different than the norm. Where, to use some modern parlance, most of us are neurodivergent in some way. And so our styles of communication or simple presence in a room can sometimes be read as creepy. And so it is important, if you hear gossip about somebody being a creep, find out what exactly that person means by that. Do they just mean that they dress weird? do they not make eye contact when they talk to you? Is the problem just that this person is unaccustomed to the communication patterns of people on the spectrum? Or is this person handsy? Are they not taking no for an answer? Are they dangerous? Because those are dramatically different character reads. And yet the language sometimes is the same. So I do understand why there are many in the community who their first reaction to discussions of this topic is to try to shut it down, because so many times it's brought up to them to make them feel like crap for just unmasking and being themselves when they had no ill intent. I do want to make it clear that's not what we're going to be talking about. I want to be very grounded in naming specifically the patterns of exact behavior that are actually problematic in our experience, and that we have actually seen or experienced, unfortunately, in the community. This isn't about having a weird way of speaking or liking the dark aesthetic or having an atypical spiritual practice. That's us too. We get that.
Yeah.
This is about making other people uncomfortable when you don't have to, and especially making people uncomfortable on purpose, or putting them in situations where they feel trapped and obligated to pretend that they're okay with something when they aren't really. That's what we're trying to get at. If you're not doing that, then I'm not chastising you. I really just want to be providing tools for us to do better and to recognize folks who are genuinely dangerous. A big part of that is taking some care to differentiate and discern actual intent. Some folks who seem creepy at first are the loveliest people you'll ever meet, deeply protective, would never hurt you. Most of us in the community, I like to think, have learned that. So many of us have been called creepy when we had no ill intent at all, so we know that. Sometimes the language of social justice can be co-opted to perpetuate injustice. Um, People can say, for example, that they don't consent to share space with a minority when they're really just racist. That's not what we're talking about. Pardon me. Okay, so let's talk about what some actual red flags are. Could you give us an example of something that you would say is um, a red flag, by which I mean an indicator that somebody is maybe not here for the right reasons, might be dangerous, might be someone you want to distance yourself from?
Well, perhaps let me think about which example to give because there's too many. Um, just to keep it simple, an example would be somebody wants to give you a hug, but you really don't want to hug that person. And you have made it clear that, I'm good with just saying hello. And that person decides that they're going to hug you anyway, saying, oh, you'll be fine. That is a direct violation of safety and comfortability. That's a no-go. Another example would be even a handshake, for example. um, it could be, and we'll get into the feeding aspects of things. I'm waiting on that story, but it could be, someone touches your or takes your hand and you don't want to shake their hand. It could be flirtation in an uncomfortable way when you're not genuinely interested in that other party and you're just like, okay, cool, I just want to be your friend. And they consistently keep trying. Those are red flags.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, any uninvited touching or explicitly unwelcome touching, especially.
Yeah.
And you see it all the time. Because, it's perfectly normal to shake someone's hands. It is not normal to push beyond someone's explicit boundaries. That makes you a creep. Don't do that. Um, that includes making off-color jokes. Even, I am not uncomfortable with adult language, but some folks are, or they are like it might be genuinely stirring up stuff from childhood. It's going to ruin their whole night. You don't want to do that, surely. If somebody tells you that it makes them uncomfortable, do your best. And I get it. F-bombs slip out of me by accident all the time. If you're somebody who really struggles with that kind of self-control, um, in any specific way, if people sometimes are triggered by things you truly cannot control about yourself, that is okay. It's not personal. That boundary still needs to be respected, though, and give them their space, their distance. Um, that's kind of an extreme situation. It's rare for things to truly not be able to be worked out for people to share space. But sometimes that is. It's still important to respect that boundary, even if it means making a sacrifice. You don't want to sacrifice your whole reputation or someone else's safety. It's way more reasonable to sacrifice this one night out. Even if it sucks, that's okay. Um, let's see. Okay, another red flag that I see a lot in the community is people making questionable claims, but then being offended if you ask them follow-up questions. I make some weird, bizarre claims sometimes. I've read a lot of stuff and I'll say, I think I read somewhere this or that. Ask me for a reference. If I can't come up with one, I might just be wrong. I'm not going to take that personally. Um, and hopefully I will be able to back up anything that I say. And maybe I won't, but at least you'll know. Um, People who get deeply personally offended by you asking them follow-up questions, um, are not there to teach you. And that's okay. I'm not saying that they're obligated to offer you an education or to answer your questions, but if they don't, accept that as if it were a boundary of theirs and move on to find your answers elsewhere. Don't consider them a source of information if they cannot give you grounded, reliable information. Um, and yet, it's very common, though, for folks who are trying to establish an unhealthy power dynamic to establish very early that it's simply unacceptable to ask them any questions or to challenge them on anything. Don't let that slide, because that becomes, in my experience, a slippery slope. If you can't challenge them to prove that they're actually descended from royalty or their great grandfather really is Aleister Crowley, or, if they can't prove that, then don't give it any weight. If it doesn't hold water, just leave it. And leave them, probably. I personally consider that a pretty big red flag. Folks who aren't open to actual dialogue. If I have follow-up questions after you give me the wisdom, and you won't answer those questions, you haven't given me anything. I could have read that in a book. I need communication from, a spiritual leader, especially personally. Also, I see sometimes people don't have to touch you to violate you. I know I said intense language, also jokes. Sometimes people will say, "Oh, I was just joking." If a joke makes somebody uncomfortable, that's really the issue. It's not about your right to tell a joke. I have a sense of humor, and I can enjoy a wide range of jokes. Uh, but that's not really the issue. If you're telling a joke that makes the room or one person of the in the room uncomfortable, just skip it. Why? It's not that important. If somebody insists and gets really defensive about their right to tell a joke, what they're really defending is their right to push past people's boundaries. And again, if they establish that foothold, they're going to push more boundaries that are a lot more serious, perhaps, than just telling a joke. If they've already established that you're too sensitive and your right to shut something down because it makes you uncomfortable is negotiable, then they'll start touching you more. Even if you try to pull away, they will start talking about you and ingraining you into these jokes. Suddenly you're the butt of the joke, and it gets really, really.
They continue to push boundaries.
Yeah, they aren't going to stop because you give in once. They're going to go further, in my experience. Speaking of which, I'd like to talk about coerced consent. Now, this is a pretty nuanced topic, because this is where it can look at first glance like somebody is saying yes. They are enthusiastically agreeing to whatever's going on. But behind the scenes, they are actually uncomfortable. You see this in cases where somebody is in, like, for example, a classic example is a boss, a high-level manager suddenly dating a new entry-level employee. And that employee might be like, "Oh, this is great. It's an opportunity. He loves me so much." He's probably offered a lot of incentives to enter into this relationship. But that gives that person a lot of power. That is, normally, when somebody enters into an intimate relationship, they want to be on roughly equal footing. But where there is an intense gap in the power, a lot of extra care would have to be taken in engaging with that person to make sure that what they're saying is actually how they're feeling, that they aren't going to have buyer's remorse the next day once the glamour fades. when the fact that this person is a little bit famous or a huge inspiration to them has worn off the next day, are they going to still be super psyched about the interaction that you had? Or did you accidentally or intentionally utilize that allure of yours to draw someone into a situation that they would rather not have been in? That can be a real challenge, I think, for some of us who have a very natural allure. Um, these patterns of manipulation can actually be um, accidental feeding methods that we didn't realize we were engaged in. And I want to touch on that a bit more in a moment. But let's see. First, I wanted to talk a little bit more about grooming and love bombing as part of as another red flag for trying to buy coerced consent. Could you tell me a little bit about what grooming or love bombing is for folks who haven't heard that?
I'll give an example. Let's say you're in a relationship with someone and someone gives you all the things that you or they feel that you need, right? They give you all these things, right? Whether it is an emotional thing or it is a physical thing. And then all of a sudden they start pulling back and saying negative things. Or like you give and you give and you give, and the energy of it is it's not good enough. Nothing you do is good enough. I would question that. I would absolutely question that. When someone uh, isn't really fully authentic to who they are, they just give you all these different things because they think that that's what you need to get what they want out of you. That can be a form of love bombing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's different when someone is like, I care about you. I love you. Here's a pretty present because I care about you. That's different. But the second they give all these things that they think that you need, and sometimes it is things you need, and then all of a sudden they start putting in narcissistic comments in there and making you question yourself and making you wonder whether or not you're valid as a individual, whether it's within a metaphysical dynamic or a vampiric aspect or just regular dayside life aspects. Question that.
Mm-hmm.
Walk away from situations like that. I can tell you that I've had to walk away from a situation like that in the past, and it's not easy. But sometimes when we're so wrapped up in like what other people or what's going on in that specific thing, we don't really fully see clearly. And so that is what an example of love bombing could be. If you're noticing that it's wrapped up with narcissism, and if you're noticing that it's not coming from a genuine place, question it. Can I answer that?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that it's okay to also refuse a gift.
Yeah.
You aren't obligated to accept something just because somebody has wrapped it in the appearances of a gift. Remember the lessons of the Trojan horse.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you a really specific, yet generic enough that I've seen it happen multiple times in the community, example of a pattern of love bombing and how it can, even though it initially seems great, turn into a nightmare. I've seen in the metaphysical communities in general multiple occasions where someone will very quickly, they'll meet this person and they'll say, "Ah, I feel this deep psychic connection to you. I know that you are destined for great things. We've been entwined for multiple lifetimes. You're so powerful. They're just bombarding you with praise and promises of deep connection and grand, wondrous things. And then suddenly, somewhere along the way, they'll challenge something that you perceive. They'll say, "Oh, gosh, maybe I was wrong about you. If you see me like that, then clearly we're not on the same wavelength after all." Now, what they've done, whether it's intentional or not, is they've created an atmosphere where you get really attached really fast and you crave reinforcement of that connection. And now all they've done is not reinforce the connection once or twice. And now you feel pressured, uh, a little bit more likely to adjust the way that you see things. You try to conform your own thoughts and perceptions to their expectations, and suddenly they're controlling your thoughts. A week into a relationship, after a few days of them just bathing you in adoration, and then a few withholding comments later, and you're changing aspects of your own experience of reality in order to make them more comfortable and to end the discomfort that they have caused. Now, sometimes this is just a miscommunication. Sometimes it really is twin flames that have become slightly misaligned by the world, whatever. That doesn't matter. If the relationship that is being cultivated is causing you to feel pressured to alter your own perceptions or presentations of your reality to somebody else, that's a dangerous, slippery slope to tread on. I would recommend taking a step back and slowing things down with that person if their opinion on your perception is so overpowering to you that you feel pressure to change. That's usually a big red flag. It's an indicator that maybe you want to tap on the brakes just a little bit. If they don't like that you are needing space or are enforcing a small, reasonable boundary, then that's a bigger red flag, and you'll be glad that you noticed it sooner rather than later. Um, but that's a specific pattern that I see a lot in the community because we're primed. We already believe in and accept that it is possible to know things deeply, even without words or too much grounded world experience yet. But that doesn't remove the obligation of someone to actually ground their claims in reality. Um, if they're only dating you in the astral realm and aren't doing any of the work down here in the real world, they are not doing the work that they owe you in an actual relationship. They can be your dream lover, but don't send them money in the real world, for example. Another thing I've seen happen. Um, Speaking of which, it's a big red flag for me when folks want to have a spiritual dynamic with you where they are an elder to you, offering you guidance, but also have financial control over you. Don't take a job with the person who is your spiritual mentor. Uh, if that job becomes your primary source of income, because now if you have a difference of opinion or need to take a step back from that specific practice for your own mental health, they can just take away your ability to make ends meet. Your solvency is a survival tool that is absolutely non-negotiable. Don't hand it off to somebody that hasn't proven that they're trustworthy with it yet. Diversify your portfolio, if you will. Putting all of your eggs in one basket. What other cliche can I throw in there?
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty, what you've said is pretty self-explanatory. It's um, keeping a balance of things.
Yeah.
And absolutely, like if somebody is one of your elders in spiritual context maybe don't work right underneath them in your regular day side job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And similarly, sometimes folks with a power dynamic, it doesn't have to be like literal currency. Sometimes the medium of exchange in the community is your reputation.
Mm-hmm.
If the dynamic in an organization is such that if you disagree with the higher ups, you are ridiculed and people start spreading rumors and gossip about you. If you can be invalidated deeply just for having a difference of opinion, then they're using their social capital to damage your reputation and control you, just like they would by snatching away your income if they could do that. So I do want to finally get back to the vampire specific stuff. We were talking a little bit about how to feed ethically. I know this is a little bit of a hot topic, hot button issue in the community.
Definitely.
So I'll talk first about an example of feeding that I think most folks agree consent is absolutely vital and non-negotiable in, and that's sexual feeding. If the way that you exchange with another person in order to sustain yourself or as part of your spiritual practice or anything, it's even more important to get consent, not less so. Organizations that say, oh, well, the fact that this person is initiated and they know the status quo here means that they have pre-consented to all. No, consent has to be explicitly guaranteed every single time. The fact, oh, well, they've been dating for so long, or this person is in such role, so they didn't need to ask. Yes, they did, and they failed. It's absolutely non-negotiable every time, even if it's, be annoying about it. That's better than being a rapist. Sorry to not mince words about it, but that is what we're talking about. That's the reputation that you could get accidentally, even with no ill intent. That doesn't matter. If you violate somebody else's boundaries or consent, even if you weren't aware that they had that boundary for whatever reason, then that's a deep violation that should weigh on you, and it will affect your standing in the community. Even if nobody says anything right away, it seems that it blew over. You will not be safe in this community if you have violated someone like this. I will personally guarantee it. A lot of folks will. It's a lot of folks have let a lot of things slide, but that doesn't mean that it will never come up. It will. It has been spoken of a little too quietly, perhaps, for a while. People already know. Do better. Stop doing that. And don't start, even if you notice that it seems to be normal in an organization. If it makes you uncomfortable, you don't have to participate. You don't have to become a predator in this sense, just to fit in. You don't want to fit in those spaces, I promise. It doesn't get better from there. The stuff that, if they're doing that out in the open, the stuff that they're doing behind those closed doors that they want you to earn the right into is even worse. I guarantee it. Sorry, went off on a tangent.
No, it's okay. So even as an example, in high school, I started going to a certain event where a lot of people would gather, and I met this guy, and I thought he was incredible. He was a vampire. Cool. Very cool. What wasn't cool was that he fed on me so hard within our sexual interactions that I would be completely drained, and I had no idea what was happening to me. And it was really like intensely emotional for me, because I was trying to figure out for like days, like, why am I so drained? Like, why the hell am I feeling this way? But yet I still want to be with this person. But then when I'm with this person physically, I'm all of a sudden not able to function normally. Like, what is going on? Well, he was a vampire and he was draining me, but he never had a talk with me about any of those specific things. And so no consent was involved whatsoever, which is a huge violation. Huge violation. It wasn't until I later on in life that I kind of like learned about what that was. And I was mad when when I found out what it was, and I was like, oh, okay, so that's what he was doing. Don't do that. Don't do that. Have the conversations that need to be had with your partners about what you're doing. Because otherwise it's outside of that ethical energy, and you don't know how it's going to affect that other person if you don't have that conversation. Mm-hmm. And even if it's a conversation of like, this is my personal opinion, even if it's a conversation of, oh, you don't need to ask me, ask anyway. Ask anyway. Yeah. I don't care if it's annoying. Ask anyway, because at that point, even if they're annoyed by it, you at least have an idea of where they're at, because they may not be at the same exact emotional space every single time something happens. You can't expect that to be something that is repetitive every time you have intimacy with someone. It doesn't work that way. Okay, now I'm ranting. You're
You're good. And I want to approach exactly that situation from from the opposite angle. As someone who has fed sexually since before I awakened, I can tell you that it is possible, absolutely, to consent to sex without consenting to energy feeding. Those are two very different, even if they are intertwined, things. Mm. When I became sexually active for the first time, was not yet aware of my tendency to feed, and so would be drawing very deeply on these partners. And in my mind, that is simply what lovemaking or sex was. It's all I had ever known of those sorts of intimate connections. It's how it always was for me, because I hadn't learned to control that yet. And so on the other side, though, more experienced folks who had had sex many times and never experienced this kind of dynamic specifically were very thrown. To them, that seemed like a deeply profound, magical, once-in-a-lifetime connection, even though to me, it was still just a hookup. This was someone I didn't necessarily ever want to see again, which had been agreed on. But to them, all of that changed because, didn't you feel that? It was amazing. By not knowing and not having that explicit conversation about what to expect and what we were consenting or not consenting to, they were left under the impression that the connection that we had was a lot deeper and more profound than I wanted it to be. And I would, if they had any instability, they would end up deeply unsettled by the experience, sometimes obsessed, left in a state of mental distress and thinking that I was the only solution to the problem, when in reality I was the source of the problem. And now you're in a dangerous situation where you might have a stalker or somebody who is very deeply unmoored by what was perhaps a completely innocent and agreed upon engagement at one point. So it is really important to have self-awareness, as well as to read the room, to be aware of your partner's state, like you were saying. Explicitly check in repeatedly This is one of the things that I loved about the BDSM community is having a mechanism for frequently and explicitly checking in. You know, you can ask somebody without breaking the flow. You know, you don't want to kill the mood right in the middle, but the middle is a really important time to make sure that everybody's still involved.
And you could still make it sexy in the way that you ask. It doesn't have to be boring.
Right. Tell them right before you go in, it's like, hey, I'm really into enthusiastic verbal consent. Let me know that you're having a good time if you are. If you want, be open to feedback, and know how to give feedback in a way that is sexy to your partner.
Yeah.
You know, you can say, "Oh, baby, that feels so good," or a little bit higher, or and of course, it's always fine to say, "I don't like that. Just stop."
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be sexy, but if you do want it to keep going, try to communicate better. I mean, you've got to. You just if you want to be a better lover, the first and I think the most effective step,
Communication.
communication. Yeah, knowing what they like and what they don't, and knowing how to give that to them is the whole thing. That's the whole point. And that's also exchange and feeding. It's just being a good sex partner and it's being an effective vampire. A lot of overlap in that skill set. And yet I see a lot of folks hesitant it doesn't seem romantic, maybe. I think that's a skill issue. Learn how to communicate romantically. You can ask for the person's color, like red, green, yellow. Stop, keep going, maybe slow down. In a Victorian accent, if you want.
Whatever works.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't have to. People should have been checking in for consent at all times and periods in all universes and things. It doesn't have to ruin the role play. Just incorporate it into your script. Let's see. Yes, I talked about that. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about how to be safe. At events in particular, it's important to have folks who are actively looking out for problem people, which is to say, not necessarily even like dyed-in-the-wool predators, people that need to be locked up for the good of society. Sometimes what I mean by people who need to be given some extra attention is somebody who got a little too drunk. They came to their first vampire event and they got nervous and they tried to medicate with one too many shots and now they're a little sloppy. And what makes them unsafe in this situation is that they might get the whole group kicked out of the venue, and suddenly the community looks a little bit worse. We have fewer places to safely gather, etc. Having somebody on hand to keep an eye out for folks who need assistance, for folks who seem uncomfortable or unsteady in one way or another, is a general rule of thumb that I think is important. It's a tradition in the community that I haven't seen neglected, thankfully, at any events that I've been to. It's always been mindfully continued in the ongoing courts and gatherings. But I have heard plenty of stories of there just not being anybody who was keeping an eye out or prepared to step in and gently guide somebody out, or not so gently tell them that they have to leave if they have been a problem. I know traditionally you would look to the O'Malley House for that.
Yeah.
We had Lady Jessica O'Malley on not too long ago. I think it was just a week ago.
It was a week ago.
Yeah, it's very recent.
Yeah.
Speaking about the history there, and that's still true today. If you can spot an O'Malley, they wouldn't have that title if they weren't prepared to
protect people.
Protect. That's their calling.
Mm-hmm.
And but there needs to be somebody at any event, any large gathering of people who is keeping an eye out, in my opinion. And it helps if they're visible. And it also helps if some of them are invisible, if I'm honest. Some people need to be findable, and some people need to be able to watch without being seen. But it's important to have some folks. And on that subject, this comes up again as a Nightkind specific issue that has come up recently in conversation with us. If it's a part of your spiritual tradition, one of your rites to take somebody into a private space as part of that ritual, that can be an absolute, some initiation traditions have to be kept secret as part of the tradition, part of the magic, part of the safety of the group involved. That's very real. Discretion is important, and it doesn't make anybody involved a villain. It can make us susceptible to rumors, gossip, and actual misconduct can happen in systems where that is normalized if we don't take some common sense steps to minimize the risks there. It helps to have groups of people sufficiently high up in your initiatory system that multiple people can be present behind those curtains or in those closed rooms, so that you have witnesses, reliable elders of the community that can say, oh, I was in the room and I saw what happened and this is what happened. Whatever happened, facts can be established if you have enough people agreeing about what happened. If you have no ill intent and you're doing everything by the book and you don't do anything wrong, but you're the only one who saw it, and it becomes your word against one other person's, then I hope your reputation is enough to win out, but it's going to be a much harder fight. It behooves us to incorporate the safety into our practices at the basic level and all the way up. And I know that might disrupt the status quo in a few traditions that rely heavily on very, very small private initiations or other rituals. So keep that in mind. If it's really, truly vital to your right to this ceremony, that you be completely alone and unsupervised with this one other person, you have to know with extra absolute unquestionable depth that this person and I are on the same wavelength about what we're expecting to happen and what's going to happen and how we're going to describe what happened if it comes up again in the future. You have to trust them with your reputation. And if you don't, maybe they aren't ready to be initiated into your system. Maybe you're not the right person for that connection if you don't have that kind of trust. Yeah, I think that's my last word on that. I have spoken much too long. I would love to hear your thoughts, Raven.
Well, I mean, safety in numbers. It's, it's important to have safety for all people that are involved. So, any event that you go to should have people that are watching out to make sure that the environment is safe, I would say. I would say also going back to some of those things with consent. It can even be within shaking someone's hand. I'm going to give you all an example. So I was invited to this wonderful event, and I was introduced to someone who is slightly higher up. And this individual completely drained my energy just by shaking my hand. And it was because of someone that I knew, not because they knew me personally, but they had a problem with somebody that I know. And That's not cool. So, being aware of your choices and what you do and how you engage with certain people, in regards to being like, can I touch your hand? Can I not touch your hand? Good thing. Very good thing.
Green flag.
Green flag. uh, yeah, reading the room is important. Everything that you've stated is exactly how I feel too. So I would be repeating what you've already said.
Oh, I don't mind. Yeah, if I had to give one more big tip and takeaway, I would say cultivate a robust network of support. Uh, it's so valuable to have somebody who really gets it and you connect with on a deep level. But again, don't put all of your eggs in that one basket. That is, for one thing, too much pressure to put on your spiritual leaders. It's also potentially dangerous if that person decides to take advantage of the absolute trust you put in them. You'll be a lot less likely to notice that gradual pushing of boundaries if you don't have some other folks in your life looking out for you to point out, hey, are you sure you want to go alone with that guy, to this remote place? Are you sure? I thought you'd only been talking to that person for a few days. It seems awfully serious, awfully fast. Those reality checks from people that you trust can help you notice things that you've maybe been glamored into overlooking.
Yeah.
Um,
Not everything that is shiny is actually shiny.
right.
Remembering that. It's okay to ask questions. That's really a big thing. I think that it would be more concerning if you didn't ask questions, because it can put you in spaces of uncertainty and huge safety issues. So it's communication, using your voice, not being afraid when maybe certain people want you to not necessarily ask those things. That's a red flag. Just, I think if you're being authentic to who you are and you're setting your boundaries and being vocal about what those boundaries are and surrounding yourself with people or with, energies that are going to be that protective space for you, then you can't go wrong there. At least I don't think you can.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, speaking of not going wrong, I am sure that we left a lot out of the discussion, that there will be plenty of people with different perspectives, experiences, and insights that we didn't think of to include, and I would love to hear it. Don't worry about offending me. This is an important enough subject that I would really genuinely like to hear y'all's differences of point of view, your experiences. Um, and if you would like any help, if you're in a situation that makes you feel uncomfortable or unsafe and you need some advice on what to do, if you are worried that you might be making people uncomfortable or that you might be inadvertently lessening the safety or well-being of others and you're curious about what you can do to control that, I will, without judgment, listen to you and try to help work through that. I think a lot of us have been there. That said, we have talked your ear off for a solid hour now. So I think we're going to wrap up. But again, we have just initiated a dialogue. This isn't the end all be all on the subject. We would love to hear your thoughts and to continue this discussion. gosh, it'll be on Facebook in the comment section here. We will be checking the comments and hopefully continuing the dialogue if anyone has any thoughts.
We also have an email address called themediumfrequency@gmail.com. So if you want to reach out to us that way through email, please, we are here to help in any way that we can to help people feel safe and feel like they're heard, and to help with growth. That's what we're here for. So
Absolutely.
with that being said, thank you so much for joining us. Next week we have
Should be Silver Blood.
Silver Blood. Very excited. Hope you'll all join us there. Thank you and have a great night. Bye.
Blessed be.